They will test you, not with swords, nor fire, nor thunder, but with glances, silences, omissions. A room full of noise, yet somehow you hear the one voice that didn't speak, the one that was supposed to. That is how people wound each other in the modern world, not by shouting, but by ignoring, not by attacking, but by slipping through the cracks of your expectation. And if you're not ready, if you haven't trained the muscle of indifference, not apathy, but strategic composure, they will own you. Because the truth is, people do bother you. You notice every shift in tone, every eye that doesn't meet yours, every "I'm fine" that isn't. You want to be untouched, but you feel everything. And Machiavelli would whisper from the shadows, "Good. Use it, but don't show it." So let's begin with a brutal truth, one that most of us aren't ready to admit out loud. The desire to be unaffected by others is not natural. It is trained. It is engineered. And it begins when you finally understand how deeply your peace depends on other people's approval, and how dangerous that is. Your life, whether you've noticed or not, is constructed around an invisible audience. Every word you choose, every outfit you wear, every opinion you pretend to have, or silence in fear, every small moment of laughter that wasn't real. These are not just personal choices. They're moves in a silent performance for a crowd you never invited, but one you now fear losing. And that's where Machiavelli comes in. He was not interested in virtue. He was interested in control, not just over people, but over perception. In his world, survival depended not on sincerity, but on strategy. And in yours, it's not so different, because power still belongs to those who remain unbothered, while the rest are drowning in emotion. To begin unlearning this cycle, to act like people never bother you, you must first understand why they do. It's not because you're weak. It's because your nervous system has been tuned to survival, not sovereignty. You're still chasing belonging. You're still seeking safety and connection. That is not shameful. That is human. But in the age of hypervisibility, where every like, every comment, every delayed text becomes a referendum on your worth, the desire to be liked has become a weapon against you. People don't need to break you. They just need to ignore you long enough for you to do it yourself. So here's the first shift. You cannot wait for people to change before you gain composure. You cannot wait for the world to stop provoking you before you learn restraint. The art of appearing unbothered is not the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of response. And that begins in the silence between stimulus and reaction. Let's say someone insults you, subtly, of course, because the modern attack is always cloaked in civility. A joke that lands too close to the bone. A compliment that's more about them than you. A snub in a room full of smiles. What do? Most people respond instantly. Not with words, necessarily, but with energy, with a micro-expression, with a stiffening posture, with a heat of embarrassment rising in their chest. That's when they know. That's when they see they've touched something real. But if you train yourself, not to suppress, but to observe, you begin to gain power. You don't respond. You don't flinch. You don't shrink. You notice the sting, and you let it burn without expression. You contain it, and that containment becomes your signal. This one cannot be moved so easily. Machiavelli knew this. He who angers you controls you. But it goes deeper. He who confuses you, he who makes you doubt your worth, he who toys with your perception of self, that person owns your peace. The antidote isn't arrogance. It's not pretending you're above it all. That's just another mask, and people can smell it. No, the answer is something quieter. It's detachment. It's the inner agreement that you will not make yourself available for every emotional invitation thrown your way, because most provocations are invitations to react, to collapse, to explain yourself, to justify your value. And the second you do, the second you start defending your existence, you've already lost. So train yourself in the small moments. When someone looks at you a second too long, don't assume judgment. When someone forgets to text you back, don't spiral into inadequacy. When someone outshines you in a conversation, don't chase the spotlight. Let it all happen. Let the ego flare. And don't feed it. This is the art of acting unbothered, not as a facade, but as a form of psychological strength. Because, eventually, you stop acting. It becomes real. You feel the quiet. You feel the distance between you and the chaos. And that's when the shift occurs. When the person who used to control your moods suddenly becomes a character in your past. When the compliments no longer addict you, and the criticisms no longer pierce you. When silence becomes your weapon, not your punishment. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious of how much of your self-worth was being outsourced, of how often your joy was held hostage by someone else's opinion, of how deeply you craved to be seen, because you hadn't seen yourself yet. And that's where it begins, with brutal honesty, with the question, who am I performing for? Strip the mask, remove the echo chamber, dismiss the imagined spectators, and stand in the terrifying light of being just you. Only then will you be free to stop performing. Only then will you act and not react. Only then will you understand what Machiavelli meant when he said that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But we will go deeper. Because this isn't just about surviving people. It's about mastering yourself. And there are layers within you, emotions you've buried, roles you've inherited, masks you've worn for so long, you've forgotten they're not skin. We're going to peel those layers back, one by one, until the only person left is the one who no longer needs to appear powerful, because they already are. Before we go further, if this is resonating with you, if you've felt this tension between performance and peace, consider subscribing. This channel is for people like you. And if any line struck a chord, leave a comment. Let's go inward, together. It begins in childhood, not with betrayal or trauma, but with something far more subtle: adaptation. You learn early which version of yourself gets rewarded, which tone earns praise, which silence keeps peace, which tears get dismissed. And so, unconsciously, you edit, you shift, you smooth the edges of your truth until you become agreeable. But there's a cost to that survival, a wound that hides behind the applause, because every time you adjust to make others more comfortable, you drift further from your inner truth. And that truth, wild unfiltered, unshaped, becomes the thing you fear most. Rejection. Now fast forward to your adult life. You are no longer under the same roof. You are no longer a child. But the programming remains. And now, instead of parents or teachers, it's society, it's friends, it's strangers on the internet, all holding the same silent mirror. Do you still want to be accepted? Then keep performing. And so we walk through life haunted by the fear of disapproval, not consciously, but in the tremble behind our smile, in the pause before we say what we really think, in the desperate analysis of what did they mean by that text. This is not overthinking. This is ancestral fear wearing a modern suit. But Machiavelli would not have pitied you. He would have studied you. Because to him, human nature was not a spiritual journey. It was a predictable formula. People want safety. People want belonging. People want to win without appearing to try. And that desire makes them manipulable. So let me ask you something painful. Have you become manipulable? Do you change your values when you're around stronger personalities? Do you downplay your achievements so others feel less threatened? Do you over-explain your boundaries to avoid seeming too much? If so, you're not alone. But you're not free either. And that's what we're here to change. You must begin by recognizing the invisible contract you've signed with the world. I will make myself smaller so you don't abandon me. Tear it up. Because the more you shapeshift to avoid rejection, the more you become a ghost in your own life. Present, but not real. Loved, but not known. Safe, but not sovereign. To break free from this performance, to act like people never bother you, you must pass through a crucible, not of fire, but of discomfort. You must learn to let people misunderstand you, to let them be wrong about you, to let them whisper, misjudge, distort, and remain calm. Because the need to correct everyone is the ego begging for validation. The compulsion to explain yourself is not strength, it is fear, dressed as clarity. True composure doesn't explain. It doesn't beg. It doesn't flinch. It observes. It waits. This is the secret Machiavelli wrote between the lines of his brutal philosophy. Silence is the loudest form of dominance. Not passive silence. Tactical silence. The kind that unnerves. The kind that shifts power. The kind that makes others reveal more than they should. Let's go deeper. Most people live in emotional reaction. Someone speaks, you respond. Someone criticizes, you defend. Someone withdraws, you chase. This is the cycle that keeps you dependent on their behavior to regulate your emotions. But what if you didn't? What if someone ignored your message for hours, and instead of spiraling, you got sharper? What if someone insulted you, and instead of clapping back, you smiled? What if someone tried to provoke you, and instead of rising to it, you leaned into stillness? Not to be fake, not to manipulate, but because you are done letting people decide your emotional weather. This is not about never feeling. It's about no longer leaking, no longer bleeding out at the smallest sign of disapproval. It's about becoming emotionally bulletproof, not because you're numb, but because you are grounded. Grounded people are terrifying to manipulators. They cannot be baited. They do not need applause. They do not shrink when others flex. They do not orbit around unpredictable moods. They observe. They choose. And that choice is the essence of power. Now, let's talk about energy. In any room, in any relationship, there is an unspoken currency being traded. Attention, validation, deference, power. Most people give it away unconsciously, with nervous laughter, with constant texting, with over-apologizing, with needing to be liked. But Machiavelli would tell you, never give what you haven't first priced. Your energy is not free. Your tension is not free. Your explanation is not free. Begin to ration it. Watch how quickly people start respecting it. Not everyone will like it. That's not the point. The goal is not to be liked. The goal is to be clear. And clear people are magnetic because they are rare. Start by speaking less. Listen more, not to respond, but to study. Watch how people reveal themselves in silence. Their motives, their insecurities, their hidden agendas. The more you listen, the more power you gain. The more you react, the more power you lose. It's simple, but not easy, because detachment feels unnatural when you've built your identity on being agreeable, on being the peacemaker, the one who's nice, the one who smooths over tension so no one feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Machiavelli knew, and most never admit, being nice is not the same as being good. Sometimes being good means setting fire to illusions. Sometimes being good means saying no without apology. Sometimes being good means walking away without a grand explanation. And if that bothers people, let it. That's the entire point. To learn to act like people never bother you, you must first learn to let them try and fail. You must allow them to play their games while you no longer join. You must let their opinions pass through you, not because they don't sting, but because you have chosen to value your peace more than your performance. This is not a costume. This is a transformation. You are no longer here to earn love by editing yourself. You are no longer here to beg for peace by sacrificing your boundaries. You are no longer here to defend your worth with endless explanation. You are here to observe the game and then win by not playing it. But the journey isn't done, because as you begin to reclaim your energy, as you become the one who is no longer easily moved, something strange will happen. The world will test you harder. The silence will grow louder. The emotional bait will become sweeter. And that is when the real transformation begins. At first, your silence feels like strength. You sit in rooms you once performed in, now still, deliberate, measured. You speak less. You watch more. You begin to see the subtle shifts in power, the ones you'd never noticed when you were too busy seeking approval. People lean in when you lean out. They chase what no longer chases back. You become untouchable, or so it seems. But this isn't the end of the path. This is only the beginning. Because eventually, something deeper rises. Something quieter than silence, heavier than composure. Loneliness. Not the kind that begs for company. The kind that surfaces when you realize how much of your identity was built on being needed, liked, included. You thought the goal was to not be bothered by people. But now you see, so much of who you were was shaped by being bothered. Who are you when no one reacts to you? Who are you when the world no longer tugs at your emotions? Who are you when applause no longer excites you and rejection no longer wounds you? This is the psychological void most never reach, because it is here, in the absence of noise, that the real work begins. You are no longer dancing for the crowd. Now you must face the one person who cannot be impressed or manipulated, yourself. And suddenly, the silence you once wore as armor becomes a mirror. You see the ways you once abandoned yourself for peace. You see the roles you played to be liked. You see the fake laughter, the eager nodding, and the chameleon behaviors. You see the little betrayals, the moments you said yes when everything in you screamed no. And the shame arrives, not loud, but surgical. Because you realize the person who bothered you most was never them. It was you. You bothered yourself every time you ignored your intuition. You bothered yourself every time you lowered your standards. You bothered yourself every time you performed for love you didn't even respect. And that's when you begin the final descent. Not into apathy, not into isolation, into authenticity. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy becomes your psychology. He never asked you to be cold. He asked you to be calculated. And now you understand why. Because emotions, unmanaged, make you a puppet. But emotions, mastered, make you a sovereign. So you begin to rebuild. Not as a performance, not to appear untouchable, but to truly be unshaken. You begin saying what you mean, not to shock, but to liberate. You begin withholding your energy, not to punish, but to protect. You begin letting people misunderstand you, not because you enjoy it, but because you no longer fear it. You learn that clarity costs connection, and you are willing to pay. You learn that peace creates distance, and you stop apologizing for it. You learn that some people were never bothered by you. They were threatened by your potential. And when you stopped shrinking, they stepped back. Let them. This is when the final transformation occurs. You no longer act like people never bother you. You simply aren't available for that energy anymore. Not because you're above it, but because you've outgrown the addiction to reaction. You now respond to life, not to people. You now listen to intuition, not insecurity. You now walk with presence, not performance. And something remarkable happens. The world begins to mirror your stillness. People treat you with the gravity you give yourself. Conversations slow down. Conflicts dissolve before they erupt. You're not unbothered because you're untouchable. You're unbothered because you are undisturbed by who they are and who you are not. And if someone tries to provoke you, you smile. Not because it doesn't sting, but because you know. They have no idea how deeply you've already faced yourself. And no one can touch a person who has sat with their own darkness and survived it. This is your final test, to walk through a world designed to distract you, provoke you, tempt you to explain yourself, and choose silence, not as an escape, but as a throne. So next time someone throws shade, remember, shadows only form when something is standing in the light. Next time someone dismisses your worth, remember, you no longer seek their receipt. Next time someone tries to trigger the old version of you, remember, that version has been buried. And you are now a sovereign, a presence, a quiet force, no longer here to be liked, no longer here to react. You are here to move with clarity. And those who understand your silence are the only ones worth hearing. You do not become powerful by dominating others. You become powerful by no longer needing to prove that you are. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them misunderstand. Because the moment you no longer need to fix their perception is the moment you own yourself fully, finally, quietly. And that silence, it will echo louder than any performance ever could.